The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and again, welcome to our California-Nevada Chat Friday, August 28th. Thank you once again for joining us as we've had a new wrinkle, certainly the fires here in California. So a shout out as we open the day to Cal Fire and the first responders and the thousands of firefighters that are working to keep us safe. We've got in particular the Sonoma Lake Napa fire, which is containment of 30% up to 90%. Also in Santa Cruz and San Mateo, about 1,000 acres unfortunately went over last night. That's up to 82,000, 83,000 acres, about 20. And also the air quality is certainly, please monitor that. We sent out a couple of emails, one this week, one last week, with links to quick air quality calculators. You can drop in your city, drop in your zip code and such, and get the reading. And as we've talked a little bit earlier this morning, things seem to be worse today than they were yesterday. The Reno air quality has gone pretty bad today due to the fires from Northern California, particularly south of Quincy up there. So again, everyone, please be safe. We have another wrinkle on top of everything with COVID-19, and again, our respect and thanks to Cal Fire and the first responders for everything that they're doing to take care of us during these crazy times. Thanks to our team, our partners in Southern California, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer Tom Mattis, Assistant Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer Nikki Gatch, to Caitlin, Bryce, and Tyler for keeping us on the air. We've got wonderful speakers today. Jim Ferrin, we've known a long time. Jim is also, among other things at the moment, president of the California chapter of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, and Craig Kessler, the Director of Government Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association. So we'll do more of intros to them. But at the moment, some remarks from our Northern California president, Dee Dee Moriarty.
Thanks, Len. Hi, Tom. Hi, Tony. Good to see you. Just want to say that I hope everybody's staying safe. The smoke is not good today. It's the worst it's been in San Francisco since the fires, and it doesn't look like it's good anywhere. So be safe. Try and stay inside, and looking forward to things improving. And thanks to Jim and to Craig. Really looking forward to hearing you today. And thanks for being with us and all the consistent good work, and throwing it back to Len.
Hey, Tony, thanks for being with us, and some words from Southern California, please.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Len, and thanks, Tom, and Dee Dee, please be safe. And on behalf of all of us here in Southern California, our thoughts go out to everybody in Northern Cal and all throughout our state and through Nevada that are dealing with the fires. And hopefully it hasn't affected anybody personally or your clubs, and hopefully it will remain to not be that being the case. But our thoughts go out to all of you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. And without further ado, I'll let our guest speakers take the reins, because I'm anxious to hear what's going to be said this morning too. Welcome back. It's been nice to have a week off, but nice to be back on this call. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. And just before we get there, I'd like to toss it to Tom. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Len and Tony and Dee Dee and everybody. It's another nice day, and glad to be with everybody. Appreciate you being here and taking your time out of your very busy days, and you are busy, and talking with a lot of people around the country and in California, and all the reports. Golf play out as an outdoor recreation is more rounds than we've seen in a long time, whether it be a private golf course or a municipal golf course, daily fee, whatever it might be, in anywhere from 15 to 25 up to 40 and 50% more rounds being played. And that calls for more openings around the facilities, or at least services, whether they be outdoors as they are mandated. Those services, such as food and beverage, seem to be doing reasonably well. To those I've talked with, one thing that we just issued another survey to find out what's going on with guest access. I would encourage the Southern California PGA members to complete that survey. That's great information. We'll compile that information and post it so everybody knows what others are doing. So thanks to Bryce and Tyler Miller for getting that out. And speaking of opening as well, whether it be an office building or a building, the California Department of Health has come up with some guidance for employers and the community in regards to opening, what the responsibilities are, what the responsibilities of staff is. So I would encourage you to take a look. We'll be posting that, those guidelines and that information on scpga.com, and would encourage you to take a look at that guidance. And I'm going to read something here just real quickly, and then I want to introduce Nikki Gatch, our COO and Assistant Executive Director, to talk a little bit about the Women's Golf Summit. And this ties in perfectly because in the Orange County Business Journal this morning, there were 3 lessons from the pandemic. And number 1 is video conferences such as Zoom are a more effective rooms. And I think a good indicator of that is with our Women's Golf Summit, and we had pretty good attendance in person when we've done it, but this summit we have over 300 people registered, and would now like for Nikki Gatch to make a few comments in that regard.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, we're extremely excited about our 3rd Southern California Women's Golf Summit. Our PGA section produces this event in collaboration with our friends at the Southern California Golf Association. In previous years, we've had anywhere from 100 to 150 attendees, so we're well over double that, not only from California, but we have 6 states represented and 2 countries, Canada and Puerto Rico. So we're extremely excited. We have a great lineup of speakers, diversity inclusion and panel, state of the industry. We've got 2 LPGA stars joining us for the day, and then of course our keynote speaker, LPGA Tour Commissioner Michael Wan. So would love to have anyone. The invite is extended to anyone who would like to join us. It is this Tuesday, September 1st, which happens to be Women's Golf Day, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The registration link is available on the homepage of scpga.com. So thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity, Tom.
Thanks, Nick. All right, thank you, everybody. And Len, take her away, as the old saying goes.
All right, Tom, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Jim Ferrin. Jim is a certified golf course superintendent at Timber Creek and Sierra Pines in Roseville in the Sacramento area. He's been there for 15 years, but part of our golf industry for 45 years. As mentioned, Jim is the current president of the California chapter, the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, and also the vice president currently of the California Alliance for Golf. Jim is very well recognized. He has introduced a template for best management practices for GCSA member superintendent golf courses, and also been recognized for turfgrass management excellence by both the Northern California and Sierra Nevada chapter of the GCSAA, as well as being recognized as a distinguished member of the year by the Sierra Nevada chapter of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. And that's actually happened twice, as well as heading the government relations for the California chapter for the GCSAA for the past 20 years. So Jim, tremendous. It's been an honor to get to know you these past few years through CAG, through the California Alliance for Golf. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing about everything that's gone on and how the industry, and again, the GCSAA was a key component of the Back to Golf guidelines, our partnership throughout the industry to get facilities reopened. And so, Jim, bit of the history and how that's all evolved and where we're headed, even to the terms of what protocols may actually survive this and stay in place. So, Jim, good morning, and thank you.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to lending some information. It's been a strange ride. I think everybody would say that. I used to term it as eerie when it all hit us in March, and all of a sudden we had certain stipulated laws, declarations put in place that definitely impacted our golf courses initially as being a non-essential business, and then evolving, fortunately, into an essential business. My golf courses are located in a senior community, so we're really impacted in terms of the governor's proclamation about protecting those 65 and over. So the protocols that we're operating under are definitely affecting our business model pretty extensively. Golf luckily opened, which I think our senior members needed, quite frankly. They were sick and tired of being at home. But like other golf courses and other golf facilities, depending what county stipulations are in place, besides what the PGA of America and the GCSAA have developed in terms of the healthy guidelines in having golf come back and be operative as a essential business. It's shut down our restaurant. It shut down our catering capabilities. It shut down our fitness center. And I'm sure other essential businesses around are finding the morph of up and down, depending on what COVID cases are out there, impacting how they're doing business. So initially, when we were a non-essential business, we still maintained the golf course. I put staff on a limited basis. We had volunteers initially that helped us. I also am responsible for our landscape throughout the common community. So we had individuals with those responsibilities as well. So we kept things kind of in place, started implementing some of the PGA of America and GCSA guidelines in terms of moderating, changing pin positions. We used to do it every day. Now we do it 3 times a week. We have a noodle in the bottom of the cup, so the flag stick doesn't need to be removed. We've posted signs everywhere about social distancing. We clean our restrooms every hour, which is very much a challenge. We don't allow more than 2 people in the pro shop at one particular time. My staff that used to sometimes team up in terms of some of their job duties no longer can unless they are gloved and have masks on in terms of traveling with one another. But we have enough transport vehicles to make it happen out there on the golf course in most instances. And then as we know, basically the single rider golf car, although I know golf courses in some areas have implemented a plastic screen that divides the 2 individuals playing, or if there's a family thing. I think what's tough for me in terms of discussing and communicating with other superintendents throughout the state is just all the different counties and what all the different counties have their golf courses pretty much operating under. We're very close to Sacramento. We're Placer County. Sacramento's been open since day one, and they have some of the same protocols, obviously, that we do. But the disappointing fact that I observed is some of the golf courses that are supposed to be operating in some sort of imperative way, observing these guidelines and these rules and implementing them, are not doing such. They are still having outside tournaments come in. They're having large social gatherings. I know one private club is still having weddings. And it's kind of disappointing to me, being, part of the industry in regards to, let's hope we never have a pandemic again, but probably something like this will occur. And we don't want golf to be a non-essential business. We always want it to be recognized as an essential business as we go forward. But it's these individuals who basically are giving golf a little bit of a black eye, has me concerned, quite frankly. So is the light at the end of the tunnel? Well, I think it is. I actually had a meeting with staff last week, and I'm going to have a meeting after I'm done talking to everyone. I think it's time to kind of go forward and get ready to sort of reopen. And now I know that's very positive. My executive director talks in terms of not opening our complete facility until probably January, which takes away all our holiday business and such. But I just have that feeling that we've got to start kind of maintaining our courses the way we maintained them prior to COVID. Excuse me. So the detail, we're a little lacking in detail here and there. We're lacking a little bit in turf quality. As many of us who are operators and we're seeing a downturn, even though we have an increase in golf, in some situations there's also a downturn, sometimes financially. So we're looking at our airification and our cultural schedules, and we're basically moving those into October just to kind of see if that might be a better time in which to do it. Usually do it around Labor Day and get it out of the way, and then we have tournaments coming in for the remainder of the fall and early winter that have been very successful in the past for us. So we've kind of altered our philosophy in that regard. Being the more or less the big spender on property, I've got to really watch now, what resources I do need, what are necessary, and what I can get away with of not having for right now and such. But the other observation is that golf is good. If my residents and our public, people who really frequent our golf course, didn't have our golf course, I don't know how stir crazy they would be going. That's for sure. So it's good to see people out. But again, it's that social distancing, trying to recognize that and such, and make sure that everybody's safe. So another factor that when you're looking at golf course maintenance and what you're trying to do is my staff. So it's tough. We don't really let them come into the break room anymore. And we just had a horrid stretch of 100-degree weather, and they couldn't get in here for the air conditioning and such. Water coolers are removed on the golf course. Water cooler and water fountains are basically shut off around the facility. So we've got to make sure that our guys are hydrated properly. So we brought in some water and chilled it in our refrigerator and such, so that it's available to them. We haven't luckily had any COVID outbreaks amongst our staffs. I've heard of a few golf courses that have, but everybody's been pretty lucky, maybe in regards to it occurring within a younger individual. We did, when we opened our restaurant to to-go orders, we did have a chef who was working a secondary job at another restaurant catch COVID, but he's all right. Nothing really transpired. So knock on wood in that regard. But you really have to, it's a whole other element, the safety factor that you're operating on. It's just not the same as coming in at 5 a.m. and getting things going 7 days a week and fighting the heat and now fighting the smoke. It's making sure that your staff is safe and observing them and asking questions and making sure that they're not coming in when they're ill or something might transpire as a result of them coming in. And my staff is very dedicated, and they tend to come in even when they're not feeling well. Well, you can't have that any longer. Where it's put a wrinkle into actually what we do for the state. We've just introduced, the GCSA developed best management practices. They had a template. I was on that task force developing it. We hired an environmental consultant who basically developed for California. We have more or less 15 areas that a golf course could develop and look at as being their best management practices. They go anywhere from surface water regulation to nutrient management to IPM, pollinators, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty complex, but it's pretty easy, and it is available to member superintendents who are GCSAA members, and it's pretty easy to develop from that template, and it would be good to get as many superintendents who do have it available to them to develop it and have it as part of their facility. It just helps us in government relations, especially and when you consider the environmental pressures that are continually coming down on us, including Roundup use and such, and that's not going to stop. It's definitely a reality of our business, and and sustainable practices as well as water usage. Yeah, we've been out of the drought for a couple of years, but that doesn't mean that the drought won't be back. And restricting some of our water usages in the way we manage our turf in the near future. Environmental regulations, especially in California, are probably only to get more stringent rather than relax. That's for sure. So I would encourage all the PGA members who know your superintendent and relate to your superintendent, and if they're a GCSAA member, I would please encourage them to get online and get their BMPs in place. It's not a difficult thing to do. There are individuals out there in the sector who will, for a reasonable fee, basically develop it for you if you don't really particularly have the time. But the more golf courses that we can have adopt these, the easier it's going to be for us in a governmental relations aspect to go into these regulatory agencies, Department of Pesticide Regulation, the water agencies, et cetera, and tell everybody that we are doing the right thing. I think when you look at golf course superintendents, for the most part, we are environmentalists. We're pretty darn good at it. We are experts in sustainability. I think it shows in the number of award winners nationally that we have in California that have been recognized for their efforts at their particular facilities, that we do a very fine job. But that doesn't mean, as we'll talk, I think, later in this program about inclusion, it doesn't mean that anybody or thinks or believes that we are. It just seems that golf doesn't promote itself enough in terms of what it really actually has the ability to do and what it does. So I would encourage you to talk to your superintendent, see what they're doing, encourage them to partake if at all possible, and that would help us. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, that was one of our big goals this year with the California State Superintendents Association, is to start getting out the word with BMPs and start assisting our 6 local regional chapters with their members of getting these implemented as quickly as possible. I know that it would be very beneficial to Craig and all the work he does to have access to superintendents and examples of golf course management that is environmentally sound and does look at best management practices. So that's kind of what we're doing. Just to kind of wrap it up, is that we're getting ready for the door to open, because I know that our golfers and the players that also play at our facility are going to be expecting conditions to be at their best. It's not going to be something that will be viewed as acceptable if it isn't. And so I think it's time to kind of get out of the doldrums of everything that's transpired, from COVID to the fires to the heat to the political dynamics that are ongoing, and try to focus a little bit on golf as being not only a good recreational sport to indulge in, but just to get away from all of this. That's for sure. I think we need a respite and some sort of social interaction, as we can see where we have issues with people not complying with COVID regulations. It's because they just miss social interaction. And I think golf is that wonderful vehicle that can provide that. So I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll take any questions if anybody has any questions.
Well, Jim, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, you and the industry and the superintendents across the country and the world for everything over these years. I've been away from a green grass facility for about 2.5 years now, but we know that there's magic that gets done, and that's become so much science-based, which is wonderful and hard to navigate, particularly here in such a regulatory land as California is as well. So thank you for that. Jim, a couple things. One, can you send us a link or let's see, we want to encourage our superintendents to get that. Is it on the GCSAA
Yes,
website?
Yes. So if you're a GCSAA member, you can go right to their website, and it's under education, and it's pretty easy to get to BMPs and establish basically a place for their golf course. Okay.
So, Jim, and there's always been, as you mentioned, Roundup, I think, is a great example. There's always something going on with the legislation in California. So between just the regular normal, I guess might be the word, regulatory issues that are faced all the time, did COVID accelerate some of this research, and did COVID accelerate some of these practices to get out there and even add some new ones, I imagine?
I don't think it accelerated everything. It seems like just me speaking personally, but also knowing the numerous other superintendents, it kind of stifled you. It gave you a chance to experiment maybe with using lesser aspects of something, because as the big spender, we just ended our fiscal year, and I saved between landscape and golf $200,000, which saved our budget for the year. So you have to be a little creative when you do that, because you're taking away from some of the resources that make the golf course as good as it can be, particularly be for play. And that's what my head professional wants. He wants to basically present the golf course so that players enjoy it, they have a good time, and they come back for more often. So I think what it's going to accelerate maybe is just the continued attitude that it is a sustainable practice we're looking at, and the value of our money and the value of our inputs. Are we getting the biggest bang for our buck? And you're right, Len, about science. Science is really big. Science and technology have really increased over the years. It's mad science at some points, but in those regards, we've been able to handle with research and such. Our green speeds are better, our green quality is better, our turf grass is better. And all those things have just improved over the years because of what you alluded to, science.
So, Jim, as we talk about now, part of the success of golf in terms of the health was that there is some natural social distancing to it, and particularly in the grounds crew and the maintenance crew as they spread out to do their tasks each day. So certainly for the short term, Jim, but do you see as we get into 2021 and hopefully move away from the stringentness of this whole pandemic, the continued use of masks and gloves just as a BMP, that it makes sense? We started and we see some other benefit to it because it seems to be on a number of levels, right, to some extent, just a low cost, wonderful protection on a day-to-day basis.
I certainly hope not, but I'm not going to say that my staff wouldn't have the option of doing that if they chose to do it. I think there's something about the outdoors, not right now, but the fresh air aspects. I mean, that's what is exhilarating to me in terms of being part of this profession as long as I have, is the early mornings, the late afternoons. I don't use a lot of pesticides and I don't use a lot of fertilizers. So for the most part, our areas of play are pretty savagely safe. And I just think it's one more requirement. We have so many requirements that we have to adhere to. Just having one more that has to be implemented, I'm kind of against that. But I'm not saying that if my staff wants to wear gloves or don a mask or such, and they feel better about that, then so be it. I will provide that if necessary, but I'd hate to be mandated in that regard.
Well, Jim, again, we thank you for your time this morning, everything that you've done individually and everything that you've done for the profession, not only the GCSAA, but of course that flows to the PGA of America and all our partners and allied associations. I hope you can stay with us for the rest of the session. Great. Thanks,
yeah, I
Jim.
appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, and letting me talk about the BMPs a little bit too. And best of luck to everybody. Everybody be safe, and we'll all get through this together. That's for sure.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, certainly couldn't do it any other way but together, Jim. Okay,
right.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to Craig Kessler. Craig, as the Director of Government Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, another area legislature where there's always something going on. And Craig, I think the legislative session officially ends Monday, but certainly things are winding down today. So we look forward to your update on what's happening and what's what's going to happen maybe within the next 72, 96 hours come August 31st, the end of the session.
Well, thank you, Len. Thanks, Tom. Thanks to both sections for inviting me back yet again to talk to you. I'm going to focus on 4 things today. Independent contractors, where there is a lot to report, and most of it, almost all of it positive at the end of the legislative session. Split roll, a little bit on congressional relief, and I'm going to go light on COVID-19, but I think there's some positive things to report there as well. Jim obviously covered it, but before I do, I want to tag on to one of the main subjects that Jim Farron just discussed, and that's the best management practices document that the golf course superintendents in this state, with some national assistance from GCSA, put together an excellent document. I was contacted late yesterday afternoon to do an interview with the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. Those BMPs in our state GCSA chapter up for some kind of special recognition or an award for what they put together. And yes, as Jim said, that document for somebody like me is of great help. It's been of great assistance to the profession or to the industry in many other states. And we haven't had one in California, probably because we're such a large beast with so many microclimates, so many people, and so many golf courses. It took more time to put together, but it's a superb document. And yes, let me attest that it's of great assistance for all of those who are advocating on behalf of the golf industry. And in many respects, in smaller jurisdictions, it almost becomes incorporated by reference into a lot of regulations and even some pieces of legislation. Well, on to independent contractors. As Len said, yes, we're at the exciting end of a legislative session, and there's been no legislative session in memory like the one we're going through right now, because they've gone into session, out of session, delayed session. They were back out again in the state Senate as one of the senators tested positive for COVID-19. And they're probably going to have a special session just to deal with financial issues after the regular session ends. But it turns out that most of after spending much of this year explaining to everyone that our number one legislative goal of taking what we've been calling a healthy measure of relief in the old AB 5 to try to take it to a more perfect form of relief, because there were some of the prongs of the 12-part test that proved a little bit problematic. We could overcome them, but there was always that little bit of doubt. And when you're dealing with law, you don't want doubt. You want to be somewhat certain. So I told everyone that not to count on anything because the session was truncated, everything is wild, and they're focused entirely on a huge budget deficit and COVID-19. Well, it turns out that the AB 1850, which all of you have been tracking, that was going to incorporate certain exceptions and exemptions that had largely been negotiated before the middle of March when COVID-19 struck, would go through. That didn't make it out of committee, and we were kind of curious why. Well, it turns out that a tax bill that was filed at the beginning of the year, 2257, has been entirely gutted and amended to take what were some partial amendments to AB 5 in 1850 and elevated them to a massive document. Now, for our purposes, it would appear, and I'm going to be a little bit vague here today because as with gut and amend, and as with a legislature in which there's limited access to the building, it's been difficult to track these things, but it would appear that at least in 2 sections, some of the things that we found problematic about doing this, being in the same course of business, have been perfected or changed in the language of that exemption. And I think what I said we wouldn't be able to accomplish till 2021 may very well be accomplished by AB 2257, which is an emergency piece of legislation, which means it has to get 2/3 votes in both houses of the legislature, but it becomes immediately effective. We need not wait till January 1. My guess is that the votes are there to pass it. It is Lorena Gonzalez's bill, and that I'll be reporting very, very soon on how that greatly benefited our cause. There's an additional wrinkle. we've talked from the beginning of this particular debate that there are two aspects of the golf industry that employ independent contractors: PGA professionals, that's of most interest to you, but also interest to the industry on a more limited basis is caddies. My negativity on ever getting caddies into some kind of professional exemption or kind of specific exemption has been borne out. However, it would appear that within 2257, language has been adopted to, in essence, institutionalize or codify the arrangement that's become popular with third-party operators, companies that in essence contract with private clubs and with some resorts in the state that that provide caddy services. And I guess there were some niggling or dangling ambiguities about whether that insulated a private club that used those services from being considered an employer. And apparently, and I think this language fixes that as well and kind of institutionalizes what is increasingly becoming common practice for those clubs that make use of caddies. So after a long period of ambiguity, we may very shortly be in store for some measure of certainty on that regard. Now, I want to also, so that's all good news. And maybe there's a point in lowering everybody's expectations, because then when you have information like this, it brings a smile to everyone's face. But I would say that it's probably good evidence that our case that we've been making for 2 years in Sacramento may have been better heard more widely than we had expected. As most of you know, last year we did get audiences with Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and that's how we did get that healthy measure of relief in the business to business for professional services exception. But we weren't so sure, we didn't have any indication that getting that more perfect measure of relief was forthcoming, but apparently it's on its way. But when 2/3 of each house vote for it and the governor signs it, then we can shoot off the fireworks. Many of you asked about Proposition 22, and many of you have probably seen ads on television because it goes to the independent contractor issue, but it is very narrowly focused on just app-based gig industries. In other words, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates. It provides special exemption for that aspect of independent contracting, but for nobody else. I guess you could conclude that they didn't raise and spend over $100 million to help any of the rest of us. So that's on the ballot. So if that were to pass, it does not affect. Of course, by then I'm hopeful that we'll have that full measure of relief, at least for PGA professionals, in 2257. So it doesn't affect the golf industry directly. But what it does affect, if it passes by a wide margin, it's a powerful indicator of what you're seeing, I think, in newspapers, and I think what you're seeing in this 2257 bill is that there's a powerful groundswell of public sort of opposition to the rigidity of AB 5, to the notion that everything is black or white or either or in terms of the fifth largest economy of the world's definitions of employment versus independent contracting versus all those hybrids and combinations that are in between. So Prop 22 were to pass, you can take your Uber again, I suppose, that's personal to you. But I think more importantly for the golf industry, it sort of sets the stage for perhaps further relaxations or further reforms in the way in which we go forward with independent contracting. So on to the second subject I want to talk to you about today, and that is the Proposition 15 on the ballot, because that affects all the property taxes of every parcel in this state except homes, except residences, homes, apartment, condominiums. What it does is, well, I was going to say under Prop 13, but actually always in California, the reassessment schedule of properties were always identical. This would create a distinction between residential properties that would continue to be reassessed only upon sale and all other properties that would be reassessed at least once every 3 years, and per whatever, I'm not going to say, don't get confused with highest and best value, but whatever the assessment basis is. Many of you probably have in your possession or aware that when this first qualified for the ballot, the SCGA put out a fairly well-researched white paper on the subject, because it's a complicated issue for the golf industry, because we have different kinds of ownership status, different kinds of golf courses, and they're all assessed by slightly different standards, well, actually radically different standards. Municipal golf courses are in essence do not pay property taxes because they're owned by governments. However, anyone who has a long-term lease does pay a possessory interest tax based upon the length of that lease. That would arguably, I would think under this, if it were to pass, would be subject to going up every 3 years. But that's a pretty small tax and not all that consequential. The state's private clubs, or those golf courses which are owned by C7 corporations, which is the model for virtually every equity country club, are quite a bit protected in their assessment basis by another provision of the California Constitution that was put in there by the voters in 1960, which is a very benign basis, extremely benign basis. However, under Prop 13, it's only reassessed upon a sale, which in effect for a private equity club means they've never been reassessed. So there's still, that basis is still based on 1975 assessments. That would change. Would it change in the way commercial property or industrial property changes? No, the impact would be substantially less, but there would still be an impact. And all of these private clubs for 50 years have been based all of their planning and all of their budgeting and everything they do on the stability provided by both of those provisions, both the 1960 constitutional provision and the 1978 provisions under Prop 13, and that would go out the window. It would also open them up perhaps to slightly different assessment bases. And the category of golf course that would be, for which there is the greatest ambiguity, is the daily fee golf course, which is more akin to a business. It is not protected by that 1960 constitutional provision that separates out private clubs. Literally, it's sort of like privately owned parklands or open spaces. But my best, near as I can tell, assessors have generally considered them both the same in terms of how they assess them. Given that this will put a focus on coming up with new methodologies, assessors will be forced to come up with new ways to do this. It sort of puts their blood in the water, particularly the degree to which we have been for a couple of years, and COVID-19 has probably accelerated what I would call a bit of a populist paroxysm that's going on in our politics. So it would not be good news, I think, for the golf industry's property tax bills to be emblazoned in the headlines. And I use that phrase only because as much as this is something which has impact, I know at least the SCGA has been counseling to be very, very careful that because this is not like the New York situation of last year, in which the state legislature took dead aim at the golf industry's property tax bills, this is an extraordinarily small component of a much bigger issue in which a lot of oxen are gored, and you're going to see a lot of those oxen come to the table, just as you've seen Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and Postmates on their issue come to the table and going to put up a lot of money to fight this. And they're including some civil rights groups that think it disproportionately affects communities of color. And so for golf to inject itself and end up with its property tax bills and some of the preferences in California law would probably not be our wisest course. Some have decided it is because some play politics in the full attack dog mode, that if it affects you, you attack back. And I think both, I know the SCGA and I think the California Alliance for Golf that will shortly take up this issue has practiced a much more nuanced sense of politics to understand that often forbearance is the smartest course, or allowing others to take the lead on certain issues is much smarter than sticking the golf industry front and center in a battle or a debate for which we are not the targets, and our oxen are not the most gored by this, not by a long stretch. I realize that what I probably explained caused more confusion among my audience here today than clarification, but you know where to find me. I can bury you in all kinds of information and lengthy reports that'll give you a better understanding of this. And I know the SCGA has been contacted by many of its clubs for that information, and by many of the GMs who have been confronted by their boards for something, and I think it's been rather helpful. I know that there are some who have criticized that white paper document for its objectivity, that somehow felt that we should have rallied the troops to fight, and I don't think that's ever our role. Is to make sure the troops understand issues thoroughly, and then we make informed decisions based upon a thorough understanding of all the facts and all the politics that surround every one of these situations, whether it's split roll, independent contractors, or anything else, particularly when they are as highly charged as this and the focus of a ballot initiative. Subject 3, this will be much briefer than the first two. Congressional relief. Well, the conventions are over, and Congress is scheduled to come back into session sometime after Labor Day. They couldn't come to any agreement on relief bills or even the extension of the unemployment compensation the last time they got together. I've been arguing, this is one of those instances where I argued to be optimistic because I thought it was in such a compelling interest for both parties, both houses of Congress, and for the nation that they come to some agreement. But I guess I underestimated just how badly divided we are as a nation and how badly divided our politics are. For the golf industry, one thing that's encouraging, because the two PGA sections are 501c6 corporations, as is the SCGA, as are most of the amateur associations in the sections across the country, including all the small chambers of commerce in America. I think there's a good chance that when that relief comes forward, there will be some measure of relief in the PPP, perhaps for these kinds of corporations. And I'm also hopeful that given that 22% of the golf courses in the state of California are owned by public agencies, and those public agencies were not in the strongest position before COVID-19, and now they're basically bankrupt or close to it. They are really hurting. And so it's never good when 22% of your ownership stock is hurting and owns golf courses, because the result is those that are those in the less populated areas that have struggled. Those municipalities may decide to give up the struggle and close those golf courses as a result. And for the many golf courses in the state, particularly in the large cities, which are quite profitable, it's very easy to see how they may drain those. For someone like me who has spent decades with some measure of success, I think, arguing that to the degree to which municipal courses in particular are profitable, you need to reinvest in those municipal golf courses in order to keep them viable over time. We all understand that the capital consumptive needs of golf courses. It's going to be very tempting for them to drain those monies for a period of time, and in order just to keep their parks departments afloat or some of their other functionality afloat. So there is a visceral interest in the golf community in the state of California in seeing to it that ultimately, when House and Senate get together, that they provide some relief. Because whether you're aware, this state, when I mentioned a little bit earlier that there was a good chance of a special session to deal with our budget problems, we literally have we have two budgets in the alternative, one based upon no relief from the federal government, and that's a dire one, and one based upon some measure of relief from the federal government, and that's still not a good situation, but it's less dire than the other. And I would suggest there are an awful lot of municipalities in the state in the same position. Now, they didn't have the luxury of the state of delaying these things. They had to adopt budgets usually by July 1st, but they are hopeful. They pulled a lot of gimmicks in the hopes of receiving some relief. And when it becomes apparent if they don't receive that relief, the gimmicks aren't going to work, and they're going to be confronted with the harsh reality of doing some things, and that will harm 1/5 of the golf courses in the state in one way or the other, and there's no doubt about that. And I would encourage you, the degree to which you're part of national organizations that do some advocacy in the halls of Congress, and SCGA is as well, and we've been pretty rambunctious on this point, that you do that, because there is something at stake. Finally, can never get by one of these chats without talking about COVID-19, although I think our friend Jim Farron did an adequate job. I'll simply state that things are looking better and better. We saw that this last week, San Diego County, in essence, dropped most of the specificity about its golf orders in favor of just a general state order, with a couple of exceptions that are special to golf. I know I've been holding out hope in Los Angeles County that they'll actually get on board and clarify their face coverings orders, and allow a form of play, group play, that is considerably safer in terms of limiting contact between golfers and staff, and that's just a fact. That's not even arguable. And I think it's been difficult to break through. I think we're on the cusp of breaking through on that, and we'll get some fairly good news there. And what's, I think, undergirding all of this, and Jim was pretty eloquent about the point, everywhere in this state, or certainly, and I'm more familiar with the southern part of the state, including that big behemoth, LA County, the numbers each day are looking better and better and better. That doesn't mean we're anywhere out of the woods at this point, but they are looking better. And that bodes well for the golf industry. And some of those things, some of that functionality, which we're still denied, will come back slowly but surely, I think, as Jim Farron shared with you, in a matter of time. And I think one thing we can probably be 100% satisfied in is, almost no matter what happens, whether we have a third wave of the first phase or a second phase of a third wave, or whatever is going to go on with the pandemic before we have a vaccine, golf has firmly established itself in two ways. It is almost was almost built for COVID-19. You couldn't have designed an outdoor recreational activity any better to coexist with it. And second, golf's been up longer than any other outdoor activity. And as Jim pointed out, in Sacramento County, where our capital is, which is pretty rich with golf courses, they never stop playing golf. And whereas we do get reports of hot spots and danger points, whether it's certain essential industries that have continued, industrial sectors, schools have been a source, no golf course, no golf activity has ever been identified as a source of spread. And even, I was going to say a hot spot, but it doesn't even have to rise to the level of a hot spot at any time. And I think that has been, in every conversation that we have managed to have with public health officers throughout this state, they are thoroughly aware of that. So I guess no matter how bad it gets, it won't get as bad for us as it does for others. And I will simply finish with something I always finish with, and I know that Tom and Len are going to finish with, and Jim reminded in a little bit more of a cautionary way. It's incumbent upon us as leaders in this industry to follow those rules, even when some of those rules don't make sense and some of them don't, but always honor that sort of rule of law, because if we stay above board, we will stay open and not cut some of those corners. So again, I think we've done, Jim Farron pointed out, not everyone's done an exemplary job, but most of us have done an exemplary job. And that maybe if you know a facility in your community that's not, a gentle reminder that they could take down the rest of us, just a gentle reminder. That's a sensitive subject, might be in order. Nothing public, nothing loud, and that's the whole point. We don't want to be on the front page of the San Jose Mercury, and we don't want to be on anyone's eyewitness news with some kind of a hotspot or a problem. Thus, so far, so good. Let's try to keep it that way. And again, I thank the sections for inviting me to filibuster you again on some of these subjects. And today's report was, compared to some of the others during this series, was pretty positive. And I hope we can continue along those lines. And with any luck, I didn't raise too many questions, but I'll answer any if I raised any.
Well, Craig, thank you. And in somewhat myopic view of our business to business exemption with Prop 22, though as we discussed, that's based on the an app for the gig economy. It is, however, independent contractor related. With the success of that, is that any kind of indication about the sentiment to our carve out, or are they just totally unrelated?
Well, no, I mean, I think in politics, the thing that matters the most in politics are votes. Anything which indicates where the public is affects outcomes. So there's no doubt that if this passes, while it doesn't provide any direct relief to the golf industry, it creates a whole new context for the politics that follow. But and again, maybe I'll just read where I'm encouraged by some of the changes which is where our relief is going to come from. It's not going to come at the ballot. In what's now the AB 2257, and for those who remember the old one, it's this new section 7. The business service provider, in other words, the PGA professional with an LLC or simply a sole proprietorship, can contract with other businesses to provide the same or similar services and maintain a clientele without restrictions from the hiring entity. Those of you remember that was a bit of a problem before because it said you couldn't be in the same or similar service. Now we know most golf courses are not in the teaching business, but it could be difficult to argue that the teaching of golf and the playing of golf are somehow totally different. This, in essence, cures that problem. And even another section which is similar, just above it, the business service provider is customarily engaged in an independently established business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. Those two things taken together solves what we saw as problems being you having to be, and particularly the B prong of the Dynamex decision, you couldn't be in a similarly situated business. In this case, it says, yes, you can, as long as it's independently established. It can be of the same nature, and certainly the teaching of golf and the playing of golf and the practice of golf are in the same nature. And then when it says that the actual provider, in this case, the PGA professional, can provide the same or similar services, I think this is exactly what we were talking about in terms of achieving it. I would encourage everyone to recognize that because PGA golf professional is not defined in the labor code as a occupation or a profession. Those things that are defined generally then have to be licensed and often have to pay fees and even have to pass tests. Now, PGA professionals pass different kinds of tests, totally independent of government. So in order to get a carve out, I want to make this point clear. You would have to subject yourself to being regulated directly by the state of California, as opposed to having control over that of the way you self-regulate on a voluntary basis, which has a great deal of prestige in the market because of the traditions you've had for 104 years right now and the high standards that you've set, that you certify. And so I would encourage everyone to stay away from that. Otherwise, you'll be stuck as licensees of the state. Yeah, there are a couple of advantages to that, but I would caution you to think long and hard about the disadvantages of that, particularly if you can get the independent contracting status that you seek through a more generic exemption or exception, really, that flows under 2257. I understand the sense that if you could see in there in black letter law, PGA golf professionals are exempt, blah, 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 that's more comforting, I suppose. But again, with that comfort comes a lot of encumbrances, including licenses, and you never know where that's going to go in the long run. In my sense, having been around golf for a long, long time, is that just culturally, PGA professionals and government and being regulated by government is just not a great fit. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my guess about it.
Craig, this is Nikki. We just had one other comment or question with regards to golf cars. So is there any way to get the state to change the language regarding golf cars? Currently says doubles golf, only if a cart has a protective partition or persons sharing the same household can share a cart. Is that more of a county issue, or maybe you could speak to that a little bit, please?
The state sets the minimum standard, and there are many counties following that minimum standard. And that minimum standard, I guess it's the plexiglass divider. There are counties that add considerably more regulation. So for example, off the top of my head, I'm aware that in Ventura and Los Angeles counties, it's single rider carts. Doesn't matter how you divide them. San Diego, I would suppose, and probably Riverside, off the top of my head, Orange, if you have the plexiglass divider. So I think those are looking for double occupancy carts would probably be looking for that relaxation within a specific jurisdiction. Given some of the other things that I think are important, that are more doable, the way, and let me back up for a moment. The way I look at these is if I can look a public health officer straight in the eye and say that what I am proposing, I guarantee you, is safer than the rule as it exists now. And there's some things for which that's very true. I feel pretty good about it. What this would suggest in maybe having double occupancy carts without the divider, I suppose, is what they're getting at. You really have that's really going to be dependent upon the economy opening up. So when we move to those phases, and by the way, the governor has a news conference in about an hour in which we expect him to lay out not the reopening of the economy, but a framework for what to be looking for and how we might go about it. So I think something significant is going to happen today. And I think if you look at that and you see the markers that are in that you'll be able to discern when the moment is right to try to move in the direction, not of amendments to orders that are just as safe, if not safer, than the way the order is now written, but amendments to orders that we could characterize as relaxations. I hope that answered the question. I think in there it was, now's not a great time to be challenging that one.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Craig, thank you. Thank you for that. And we look forward to, what does come out of the session, at the end of the session. As I said, there might be that vote on 2257, and also following the official end of the legislative session would be a potentially a budget meeting early next week as well. So, and thanks for the reminder about watching Governor Newsom this afternoon for our latest information. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start to wind down. And at this point, toss it to our Southern California colleagues. Mr. Tom Addis. Tom?
Ellen, thanks, and appreciate it. I'd like to remind you too that we have gone to an every other week program, if you will, and September 11th will be our next program, and we have some special guests related to not only golf programming and activities, outdoor activities that we've been doing, but related to 9/11, our military, and such. So look forward to that. Would like to echo what Craig was mentioning, to continue to seriously follow the protocols that are out there, whatever they might be aware of them. We have them posted on scpga.com. You can go to the COVID-19 section of the California state, the state of California. NCPGA also has posted, so really beg you and encourage you to follow those guidelines, and don't cut corners, as was said. And each week I say something because I continue to see in many posts, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram, the two that I most generally use, that there's still photographs and posts that have golfers, and they're current. They're not advertising photographs necessarily that you might see in a commercial or videos you might see in a commercial. These are celebratory for the most part, that arm in arm, people are arm in arm, and definitely not paying attention to social distancing, and of course no face covering. So we continue to, and when I talked with Dr. Landsberger frequently, continue to talk about face coverings, continue to talk about social distancing, and the touch points and washing your hands, keeping yourself clean and sanitary in that regard. And that's what's helping now today in changing these numbers, and hopefully we can continue that. So again, I'll keep preaching that, and I appreciate the opportunity to preach that. And with that, Tony, do you have a couple closing remarks?
Sorry about that. I was on mute still. Just want to say thanks, Tom, and everybody for the time today. And like Tom said, just make sure we keep on keeping on. And it's nice to see that San Diego County and Orange County have come off the watch list, but that doesn't mean we're out of the weeds by any means. So just make sure we keep an eye on that. And Tom, I'm surprised to hear that you're not on TikTok and some of those other forms of social media, being the guru that you are. But your point is well taken, and hopefully we'll heed that. Everybody have a safe and healthy Labor Day weekend, and let's raise a lot of money for Patriot Golf Day, and let's do a lot of good. So let's just keep on keeping on. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Tony. Len, thanks, and thanks everybody for your help. Len, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tony. And Tony, I think Tom just has such an advanced use of the filters. We just don't recognize him when he gets going on some of the other channels, which is great. So
that makes sense.
Again, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Craig. And of course, Kevin Fitzgerald for everything in the background, and for our teams with Nikki and Caitlin and Bryce and Tyler for getting us on the air. As Tom mentioned, and Dr. Landsberger mentioned, and Dr. Mattias has mentioned, and on and on and on and on, as Jim, emphasized as well. Face coverings, washing hands, and distancing. Everyone has agreed. Maybe we don't agree about touching a flag stick or not touching a flag stick, but everyone has agreed that face coverings, washing hands, and distancing are key. And as Tony mentioned, the watch list, there were about 7 counties that came off. 7 Northern California counties that came off the watch list, but yet many are still on there. Even with that, Contra Costa County is going to be opening some personal care spots this weekend, and Alameda County is also now starting to allow outdoor hair, nail salons to open as well. So we're moving, it's as though we're moving in 2 or 3, if not 4 or 5 directions at the same time. So as Tom mentioned, we've got quite a session lined up for 2 weeks from today, 9/11, and then of course continued. Our thoughts go out to our colleagues in Louisiana and Texas, as Hurricane Laura has gone through there, and certainly created quite a bit of devastation. So please keep them in mind, and to all our members and associates affected, whether it be by the hurricanes, whether it be by the fires here in California, and the PGA Disaster Relief Fund is available. So you can find those links on our websites as well, Northern NCPGA, SCPGA, and of course the PGA of America. So with that, as Tony mentioned, a safe and prosperous Labor Day weekend. Everyone, thank you for being with us today, and we'll talk in 2 weeks.
Thank you all.